It is Wednesday, February 19th. This is our first meeting in the morning. We're going to spend time here with Agency of Ag as well as BGS. So we've got two things on our capital budget that the governor has proposed. And one is with the Agency of Ag, Section 12. That's the first one we're going to do, right?
We're gonna do Vale first.
Yep. So what Vale is the, down at VTC, it's our lab, our Agency of Natural Resource, it's our ag and environmental lab down at VTC. And we built that lab back after we lost the lab up in Waterbury at the complex with Irene. We built a new one down on the VTC campus. And we right now share a heating system with the college, with our lab. It's our health lab and our environmental lab. So there's been issues with that in terms of the continuity of a continuous heating source, particularly for our lab and our specimens within our lab have to be kept at a certain temperature and certain humidity. And during the, really the summer months, but a little bit in the spring and maybe a little bit in the fall, really hard to regulate that because the heating system at BTC, particularly during the summer, they really don't run it. So there's some issues there and we're trying to replace that heating system for our lab. We started this last year. We put in about 1.5 million last year. And the governor has recommended this year that we put in 3.5 million for this project. So that's the first part that you'll start out. And then we're going to shift gears to the clean water section, which is section 10. And we're going to be dealing with the Agency of Ag on the water quality grants. And there's 3 million for that. So we've got a packed morning between now and about 9:45. I'm assuming, Joe, you go first or not for the lab?
Vale was up first, yes.
Vale is up first. Are you cold? Okay. You need a hot flash. Good morning.
Morning.
No, because this is under
Oh,
BGF.
Is that?
This is under BGF.
No.
No, it's under
They're
Agency of Agriculture.
strong, well,
There it is.
19.
It was hard to find these tabs. There you go.
It's a big one.
Oops.
Oopsie.
Now, this thing all popped open. So Joe, it's all yours. While I get my book together.
Good morning. For the record, Joe Ajik, Director of Design and Construction with Buildings and General Services. Chair, so, we are here today at Section 12 for the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets and appropriated to the funding is appropriated to Buildings and General Services. For new heat systems at the Vermont Agriculture Environmental Lab in Randolph Center. This started out back in 2019. The lab was completed after, Madam Chair said, after Irene took it out in Waterbury. And at that time, we removed from the contract a separate heat plant that we had designed for this. We had concurrent designs going on at the time, and that was to connect to the campus heating system and or have a separate heat system. And at the time, I felt that I forget the actual credit dollar amount that we got from the contractor, but it was viable to connect to the heat plant of the campus. That campus has steam heat. However, the lab requires steam year-round.
Requires what?
Steam year-round because they use it in their autoclaves for sterilization. During the design of the lab, the engineers believed that the campus system could provide 50 pounds per square inch of steam. The campus can only produce 48. And they cannot produce it continuously. Even nice cold days like today, they're cycling up and down. We're working with them to try and figure out what the issue is, because it should be a constant pressure. That said, though, come springtime, they shut down. They have 3 boilers that'll operate the campus and Vale, but they leave one running to operate for us in the summer. And during that summer month, because of the size of the boiler, it's short cycles, meaning it comes on, it fires, gets the steam pressure up, and it's done. Not sure the time frame, but that could be running as little as 5-10 minutes, which is not good for a boiler. So it's constant wear on the boiler.
Mhm.
And so what we're looking at doing with the funding that was provided in 24 and 25 was to do the standalone heat plant just for the lab. It was cash funds, Madam Chair, 200,000. And what we were looking to do is, because the time frame has changed, codes have changed, we wanted to make sure our design was correct. We were having 1 wood chip boiler and 3 propane boilers. Wood chip would run in the winter, colder months, and then would switch over to propane during the summer months. Just this past fall, the university was looking to update their old boilers, and they started with, and it's in the capital bill, with Johnson State College to start replacing theirs. And at the same time, then looked at the Randolph campus and said, well, those boilers are old also. So why should we proceed with doing a standalone plant when it's more efficient to be using their plant if we could work out an issue with the short cycling and the large boiler operating? So what we're looking to do now is somewhat of a little pivot, do a summer boiler, fuel still to be determined, oil or propane, to manage us during the summer months so the lab still has heat. Sorry, has steam for the use. We've also are going to investigate their autoclaves to determine whether or not we can operate them at less than 50 pounds, because they have been, or do we have to put in some type of steam generator so that we can actually reduce the pressure across the campus and what's coming to our building. The only reason Vale needs 50 pounds of PSI is for the autoclaves, for sterilization. The building runs at far less. Face off would shoot me if I threw out a number, but it's like 5 to 15 pounds. So that and consistency of what they can provide, maintaining constant pressure, will go a long way at less. We still have to investigate and find out why they're not able to maintain a constant pressure, but it could be age of the boilers. Their boilers also operate a number 4 fuel. Very hard to get now. Not a lot of companies in the state that are using number 4. So it would be to evaluate switching to number 2. If it goes to number 2, then possibly the summer boiler could operate off of number 2. It would be propane. There's no natural gas in that area. So it'd be one of those 2 that we'd probably be looking at. The campus has room in their existing heat plant to house a summer boiler. That would save us from building another building running separately from the campus. And that would be running off the campus with a summer boiler would be a more efficient system. And it may be that the additional funding is to look into the replacement of their boilers, and would that involve wood or just the number 2?
It's just a quick question. So if the issue is pressure for the autoclaves,
Yes.
is there an option that just has some kind of small system that literally only runs the autoclaves if everything is.
We reached out to the manufacturer and we believe that is a possibility.
Mhm.
But we still have issue of still maintaining that constant pressure, and then the summer. We'll still need that summer steam. It also provides us with hot water.
But the reason I asked, like the school system is doing okay for that stuff, but not the autoclave.
Right. The autoclave
I'm
wants
just curious. And
a
no,
higher pressure to operate.
Yeah.
So if we can get a system installed from the company that manufactures the autoclave, and it picks up that difference of whatever we're bringing into the building at a reduced rate, then that would work out great. And that would also help out with the college of not having to produce that higher pressure steam, because their campus also does not run at that high pressure.
Empty seats.
thank you.
So I'm trying to get my head around this because it seems like we're starting from square one again, the beginner. So is there also at the point now with VTC where they have to change out the spoiler? Regardless of what we do with our lab?
The existing boiler is short cycling, and that could be an issue in failure. So then they would have to make whatever repairs required to do that. During that time frame, because they do have another boiler, they could switch over and the lab maintains it. But again, that is wear and tear on old boilers to begin with. So thus the summer boiler is to put that in and provide it just to Vail, because we're the one that needs it. And that'll save us building a building.
Because we have room within their current.
Right now, there's a ground lease with
Right.
the university, and that is over by their existing.
Right, and there would be space there for us, if we do a summer boiler, there would be space there to house that boiler.
If we did a summer boiler with the university, it would go inside of their heat plant. We would not have to build a new building.
And if we did it for just us,
If we did it just for us, we would put in the wood chip and the 3 propane boilers, because we're already permitted for all that. If we deviate from that, we open up Act 250 and local permitting all over again, just for those issues.
so I'm just thinking this through. If we do something in partnership with VTC to help their boiler situation, are they putting money on the table?
No,
Or is
they're
it all in our nickel?
right now, this money would be looking at that with a summer boiler and converting to number 2. And maybe what the future would also show back.
At 3.5 million plus the 1.5. So we've been doing some work on behalf of VTC in terms of how they would go forward with replacing their boilers. But the state would be paying for that initial analysis.
Yes. Right now, their boiler operator does not work during the summer. So they come in on a minimal basis. Our own maintenance staff have helped out when we've had issues with the boiler providing us steam. That is why we were looking to do our own standalone system. But then this has come into play. And this is our recommendation. It works for both the colleges and for the state.
Right.
Do you happen to know how the Randolph boilers compare to the status of the Johnson State boilers? Because you said that those are prioritized, but
I don't. It was a university that did that.
yeah.
I have no idea what the cost of an autoclave is. Is it more than $3.5 million?
It is not.
So is there a
Well, that's,
possibility of replacing the autoclave so that it fits into the existing system makes more sense?
it's a possibility, but I don't know pressure wise how that works and everything else. We haven't looked at that and replacing it. But we still then have to rely on the college providing us steam year round, and that's where the problem comes in. So even if we change out the autoclaves and able to reduce the pressure to the autoclaves, we still have issues in the summer, running those boilers. Yes. So if it cycles and it goes down,
Yeah, no, I understand the cycling thing.
and the other issue then is if all the boilers die,
Toast.
so does the lab. The lab will be shut down. And so they, 2 years ago, they were doing renovations. 3 years ago, they might have started. They were doing renovations to their plant. They provided a temporary boiler to keep us online during the summer. Their parts didn't come in. They had to go back online, put part of their system back together to get them operating again. And that's when a lot of this was coming to light, that we were having issues. Is that when their system goes down, so do we. And the agency can talk about the issues with when their lab goes down.
Because I think it'd be good for the committee to hear what type of testing goes on at that lab.
Yes.
John, do you have your hand up?
Right, yeah. Joe, so does this heat plant heat the whole campus as well?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so it's not, it's like everything. So it's what, it's all forced hot water through the
So
whole?
the campus is all on a steam loop, and they go through heat exchanger at each of their buildings. I don't recall if their buildings operate off of steam and or are converted to hot water.
Right. What,
The lab does. We convert from steam to hot water.
gotcha. Yeah, that's enough for now.
Other folks? I'm not done yet.
Sorry.
Thank you.
I was waiting for committee members to weigh in here. So to date, you've got 1.8 million. And how much of that's gone out the door?
Right now, we are sitting on the proposed contract to execute, but it is based on a standalone facility. We keep that on hold because the contract that we had in place in the RFP to produce that is based on evaluating the existing plans, bring them up to code, and then construct it. So we would probably cancel that and put out a new RFP to evaluate what a summer boiler requirement is, and also whether or not switching to number 2 is the proper way to go and what that cost is, and whatever future it could be. Yes.
So how much have you spent all of that 300,000 of cash?
We have not spent any of the money yet.
So
It's all
it's,
unencumbered.
it's all unencumbered. The 1.8, well, the 1.8 is only for, 1.5 is for FY 25 and the 300,000 is FY 24. So the governor has put in 3.5 million for FY 26. So what is the intent of that 3.5 million? If we don't know what direction we're going in yet, and I'm assuming, I don't know, correct me, either way, the 1.8 would be used for our redirection. So we're gonna halt, but where we were headed.
Mhm.
Right now, you've got the RFP out, you've got the proposal back. Right now, the thinking is to halt that and revisit with the new information that's come to light with VTC. To kind of revisit that. How long is it gonna take to revisit it? And then would that 1.8 be used to go forward with a new plan?
Yes, it would be. And how much of that 1.8, how far would that go? I don't know. Because I have not investigated that yet.
So what would the 3.5 for FY 26 be used for?
That could also be part of the plan of converting to number 2. So if we're looking at life cycle cost, and the life cycle cost is you get better off on number 2 oil as opposed to propane, we would want to switch to number 2 oil. I believe they have 2 fuel tanks down there for the number 4. And if they're running out number 4, we'd have to put in yet another tank and or propane tanks to operate that summer boiler. So if we're going to number 2, the best thing to do would be to convert their existing boilers to number 2 at the same time for the efficiency of it and for the cost.
John?
So then, again, this is, the oil and the chips.
Mhm.
Long term, what's better to go with? It seems, and like, I guess, cost wise. And even like, is our chips burning cleaner than number two, like going out into the, into the air that we breathe?
Can't answer that one. However, back when we were evaluating and going through the design process for the lab, there was a study that was being done at the same time with the university to look at chips on their plant. And they did a life cycle cost analysis. And I think the payback was like 10-year period. And it was at that point in time, $4 million for one boiler, $5 million for two smaller boilers, so that, in the shoulder season, warmer weather, you only need to run because you can't shut wood off. So there is that potential out there. Anything that we did, if we did a summer boiler, it's on the inside of their existing plant. So the footprint outside would not be impacted by that. We would still need a summer boiler to carry the lab, and you wouldn't be able to run off of chips. So anything for the future that we'd look at in that aspect would not be impacted.
And you said it's a 10-year life cycle, or 10 years when you get the money back on wood chips.
That was backing that study.
Right.
The study wasn't done for us. I would have to reevaluate that study for today's world and prices and the likes of that.
And does the wood chip last longer? Or does the number two oil burner last longer?
They're not comparable.
Oh,
The boiler itself, yes, but the boiler, the number two head and gun that produces the flame and all that, compared to your chip system, are separate, because your chip system has a lot more moving parts.
see, so
Moving floor, conveyors, augers, ash waste. But back then, that study did prove that wood chips is less expensive. I think all the studies we've done at BGS have always shown that wood chips are less expensive to operate in the long run.
okay, thank you.
So I'm still trying to get my head around that if we do this, if we don't have a standalone facility, as we had originally thought, that we sever our heating system from the college, specifically have our own for the lab. That's where we were last year. And what's now come to light is the boiler at VTC, the boilers are really entering their end of life issue. So then the question is, do we continue with a partnership with VTC in replacing their boilers to make it more appropriate to also meet the needs of our lab? Is VTC going to put any money on the table to replace their boilers, or is it all going to be on the state's nickel?
That's why I asked.
I know, and
They're dragging their feet
I
on
keep
Randolph,
going back.
anticipating that.
That's my struggle when I'm looking at 5.3 million.
If VTC were to replace a boiler Randolph campus, was to replace a boiler, we are required under the agreement to pick up a percentage of that because of our usage. So we too would be paying on that boiler, any of the boilers that they replace. So because it's not limited to just one boiler, if they were to go and replace all three of their boilers, we would be picking up whatever our percentage is on all
You
of
know
them.
what that percentage is?
I don't.
Would be good to.
And what if our situation changes before that? Is that
I mean, by the.
meaning if we do a standalone before Randolph
Mhm.
changes their boilers, are we still on the hook for a third of their costs?
No, because we completely.
Right.
Separate
Okay.
from-
So there's not a contract in place that,
Yeah, we continue, no, it'd only be if we were
Okay.
using their system.
Do you find what is in that contract for the percent
Yes.
we need to pick up?
Because it's not only their maintenance, but it's also the fuel that they go through. The water usage that they have, everything is definitely percentage of what we consume. Well, I will get that for you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to hurt the college. I also, looking at our commitments, our state money, I don't want to use it all and not have VTC also puts, and I know that if we decide to go with them, and then we don't have to build a standalone facility, there's savings there to us as well for that. If we can use the current space there at VTC.
Maybe.
So there's, well, that's what they're
Yeah.
gonna figure out.
Yeah.
Sean,
Just trying to wrap my head around, the use and stuff. So the lab, it's used by us right?
It's ours.
Exact-
It is ours, yes, all state.
Does the school use it as well?
No, they do not. There's an agreement,
there was an agreement that maybe
Going
for
to-
curriculum,
yes, to have some type of, Cheryl, answer that one?
Hi, my name is Cheryl Achilles. I'm the lab director at the Vermont Ag and Environmental Lab. So yes, the college does use our capabilities with microbiology testing, so water quality testing for sure. And some of the impacts that the lack of steam has are across all programs and other divisions within ag. So weights and measures, highly affected by the lack of humidity control within the lab. They calibrate all scales across the state, and as you know, that it has to be a tight tolerance. So quality is a high priority for us, and I heard mention of autoclaves. If it's okay, I'll speak to that as well.
I think it would be really helpful for the committee to, if you could share what as a general type of testing happens in both the ag and environmental lab. Because we're serving Vermonters who
Absolutely.
are coming in. It could be soil testing, it could be agricultural products, it could be environmental issues, water quality. I think it would be good for the committee to have that background.
Yep, and you spoke to most of it. So primarily our organic chemistry testing does pesticide testing for the Agency of Agriculture. Sometimes residue testing for AMRs they ask, but it's pretty rare. It's usually ag. Air toxic testing, which is air pollution testing, that's all DEC. And we made a comment to them when they talked about wood boilers. We're concerned about the smoke generated being sucked back into the lab, affecting the baseline of all the tests. So there's that we're hoping to get to the bottom of. Feed and fertilizer testing. So if it's pretty humid in the labs, we have to do some grinding, also chlorophyll testing for DEC. They go out and monitor all the lakes, streams, and tributaries. So chlorophyll, think about all the plant growth. If there's an overgrowth, they're measuring that to check the health of things. And we grind those filters for them. And if it's too humid in there, it becomes a paste and you can't work with it. Alternatively, if it's too dry, you can't work with it, right? So there's that. Metals testing, that's another factor. So the digestions that we do, it's like a pre-step before we put it on the instrument. That requires an autoclave. And if we don't have the steam pressure to do that step of the test, sometimes our testing is late. So the deliverables to our customers and clients are also a problem sometimes. Summertime, as you can imagine, it depends on the snow melt. Past couple of years, the rains have come early. So in March through November was our busiest, highest volume of testing. So we had to struggle with that, always checking there's a gauge downstairs in the basement that we check to see if there's enough pressure to run these things. So we're trying to do our best with what we have, but it's been a long slog. And I've only started in 2023, and this has been ongoing for, I think, the lifespan of the building itself. Oftentimes VTC doesn't communicate either. So when the steam comes down, how you know the steam is down is when something doesn't work. So that's when we run down and check the gauge as well.
I don't want to overcomplicate it, but I just want to ask this question. Is that the building that we need to be investing a heat system in, or could we move that laboratory somewhere to another building? I just thought I'd ask. It could, I'm asking a question. If I'm absolutely wrong, I'm okay with that.
Right, usually, I came from the health lab, and to move that lab was,
Yeah.
quite expensive,
Okay.
a 3 mile.
That's another fiasco.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just, you know, if it's a degree, I mean, we're looking at a lot of other buildings that aren't doing well. If the building was built in the sixties.
Not the lab. The lab was built in 1760.
2019.
2019.
Oh, okay. Oh, so it's.
Oh, yeah, it's a new building.
It replaced
Oh,
the
gotcha,
one
okay.
that flooded in Irene.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's brand new.
so the steam pressure, from what I understand, it's not only the autoclaves that we're concerned about, it's the HVAC system within the building. So the demands, the 50 PSI that Joe mentioned, there's more than just the autoclave demand to it. And also the sidewalk, from what I understand, part of the sidewalk is heated. So I don't know if there's steam pipes under there or how that works. It could be just electric, I don't know, but I wanted to point that out too. So autoclaves require to sterilize anything about 21.5 pounds of pressure. So to run at a razor's edge like that, it oftentimes will trip the autoclave to fault and not complete the cycle.
Yikes.
Were you mentioning the sidewalk because you could cut that off and gain some more pressure inside?
I don't think so. I
Okay.
think it's totally minimal, but I just wanted to point out there's a lot of asks to that steam boiler
Gotcha.
versus just the autoclave.
Thank you.
So for replacing the system, are we gonna have to get into the piping system that's possibly underground?
You know, the pipes are already there. When we built the lab, we teed into the existing campus system. And that's what we're using. And with a summer boiler, would be the same thing. If we were to build our own standalone plant, there is underground work to connect us into it. It's not far, but it still would be done.
So what was the cost if we built our own standalone system? And you sent out an RFP, you've gotten some bids back
Yes, for design.
for design. And any ballpark figure in terms if we were to go along and do a standalone?
Our best estimate was roughly $5 million when we put this together last biennium. So now we're bringing our design team in to check for code. The commercial energy standards have changed. So the insulation on our building will have to be increased because they were built on the previous code. That was one of the things. So also insulation around the slab and under the slab has to be taken into account also. So there will be some cost increases from what we had for a credit back when we initially built it in 2019.
Built the lab itself.
Yes. That is when we took the deduct alternate, that we got our credit back. And since then, with inflation, lack of workers out there, we're looking at over $5 million to build that new facility.
So that 5.3, that $5 million that's between our two spreadsheets is based on what you were last year, what BTS was anticipating a standalone facility for the lab only. So now it has, we don't know what direction we're going to go in. So now you have conversations going with VTC in terms of addressing their issues and possibly citing whatever we need within their building, their facility. You still think it's going to be within the $5 million range?
I haven't evaluated that, so I don't know what the boilers are going to look like. We would do more than one summer boiler for the redundancy so that we could still provide some steam. So I don't know if it'll be 2 or 3. If you do 3, you do slightly over a third. So that depends on what you need for heat. Because they need the steam, as the director was saying, is for dehumidification. So they supercool the air, then you provide the reheat to it. So the supercooling of it takes the humidity out of the air, then you gotta bring that back up to temperature. So we still have to provide that. But depends on the day, you know, if it's 90 with 80% humidity, that's a lot more steam you're producing. But if it's a nice June day where, you know, you're at 70, low humidity, maybe only one boiler has to be operating to make that work. I don't know enough about it because we haven't designed it yet. So it'd be 2 or 3. If it was 2 boilers, you're just picking up a little bit over 2/3. So that if one did go down, you still could provide some function.
I think there's a lot of reasons to have standalone. Lots of reasons. But for like cost benefit analysis, it'd be hard to do without knowing what our share of replacement of their system would be. You know what I mean? Like, so if we're 5 million and they replace all of theirs and say it's 12 million, I don't know what it is. And our share was 4.5 million. We're not that far behind, but we have control. So like, I know we can't get that information very quickly, but it'd be handy to know, at least for evaluating the different costs. But I think there is a lot of value, especially from what we're hearing about what the lab does and their needs to having a standalone. But as far as evaluating which one is more effective, I mean, it could be 2 million for our share and versus 5.5, and maybe that's worth it. But
Without completing a whole evaluation of their system, you're right, that is hard to say. But right off, we could have probably, I don't think we'd have it available for this summer unless these boilers are sized properly, that, you know, they're sitting on a shelf someplace. It could work if we went with propane, because then we wouldn't be buying another tank to bury in the ground for number 2 fuel. That it could be operating. It could be operating this summer, late fall. The hard part is, of course, we don't get the funding here until on passage. So, you know, looking at May, June, but that's potential in the later half of the season. If we can, comes in all assembled, we put it in and then just have to put the steam pipes in, it could be relatively quick. If we do not have to go back to Act 250, I still project that we might be starting construction next year, next summer on a standalone heat plant. If we go back to Act 250, I'm not so sure because we do have a few neighbors who don't like the looks of the facility, potential sound issues. The original permit was held up on appeal. It took a better part of a year or more
1.5 to 2 years.
before that was settled.
Yep.
And the only reason that got sold was
I sold.
the guy sold the property.
So he was claiming you wouldn't be able to sell the property.
Right, so I don't know where that would go, and then in the short time, they lose the use of their lab on any given day. And so it's not just the employees who are there, but as the director was stating that, you know, their samples could be lost, and then they have to go get additional samples to retest them. And that's really hurting the people they're serving.
Kevin?
What comes to mind is, in your current proposal, you'd be using existing space other than building a new building. The question in my mind is, so we use that existing space, are we eliminating what in the next few years you're gonna need that space for? We're gonna have to build another building anyway. I mean, generally, you don't oversize buildings, so why is this space available? And what are we limiting ourselves for in the future? Or maybe it's so small of a footprint, it doesn't really matter, right?
They do have space for their building, exactly what it's being used for, I don't know. When they added the 3rd boiler years ago, they had their plumbing and I think electrical shop in there. And I don't know what the remaining space is now, but if they were to look at replacing just their boilers right now, they'd be replaced in kind, they would need additional space. If they went to a chip boiler, so yes, you would need at least a storage for the chips alone.
Right.
And then with chips, you're also going to have a backup system unless you have multiple chip boilers that can handle that. And if they're sized properly, but that is not something that I can speak to, but that would be one of those things that I don't think that their lost space is going to hurt the college that much as opposed to what they're probably gaining of not having to end up replace a large boiler in a few years.
Doesn't sound like they want this wood chip boiler anyway, because smoke.
Well, that's the lab.
Lab, we got two
And,
separate
and,
labs.
right.
The lab and we got the power.
And I don't know if there was any type of a study that was done back when we were looking at putting a standalone wood chip boiler in to alleviate any of those issues. Because they do have new equipment to be scrubbing the areas it's going through. But that would be one of those other things that if we were going to do a standalone to evaluate that. Otherwise, we would be just probably running off of propane or number two fuel. And then we have to open our permit back up.
So I'm trying to get the time frame. So if we did the standalone version, you wouldn't begin construction until the summer of 26
The earliest.
at the earliest. So then you're in FY 27 budget wise.
Mhm.
Okay, so if you're anticipating 5 million to do a standalone facility, it might trigger Act 250.
If it's just an increase of the insulation around the building and a few other energy codes, no, as long as we stick to what we originally permitted for.
For the lab.
Yes, for the standalone.
For the lab.
Right.
Just be about still, even with the upgrades that you might need for code or insulation. You're at the 5 million plus,
Yes,
you still wouldn't start construction until the summer of 26 at the earliest.
yes.
If it's Act 250 triggered, then it will be later.
Depends, yes, it very well could be. I don't know how Act 250 would go. Again, that would be one of those things that we'd have to evaluate.
Depends on the neighbors. So if we worked in conjunction with VTC for the work they need to do to replace their boiler, we would be using their space for our boiler needs. Did I understand that you think you could get that all done by this fall?
Possibly, yes. I don't know enough about it to know exactly what the size of the boilers are and what's out there. But there is that possibility that could be done.
And who would be running that part that would be feeding our lab? Would it be VTC running that?
Yes, it would be. It would be the college. They're gonna be their space, their boilers, they'd operate it. Just as they do now, and then we would be paying them so much. Whatever the bill is, monthly or whatever, seasonally.
For the use of the boilers and oil or propane, whatever is assumed. So how can you avoid the issue of not being notified if a boiler is down? Is the thinking you get these new boilers and everything's gonna run hunky-dory?
Yes. And the reason being is is a change of fuel. Number 4, fuel is thick oil. And so that is a problem of making sure that that is operational. Whereas if you're gonna go to number 2 and or propane, it's just like your home boiler, only larger scale, that they pretty much operate on their own. There can be issues. We have plenty of them throughout the state that we don't have somebody constantly watching them. When we were operating number 6, both here in Waterbury and in Montpelier, we had 24/7 operators that whole time because of the cleaning that's required in these boilers, in the burners.
For the number 4.
Number 4, and here we had number 6, but yes, because of that, you also have to heat. So you're taking some of that steam heat and or electric heater that goes into your tank to warm that so it actually can flow. So the reliability will increase substantially by doing the summer boiler.
Kevin?
But if we do nothing, the probability of the cycling of these boilers, what's the risk of, what's the probability we're gonna have catastrophic failure and nobody's gonna get heat? I mean, you got 3 of them, I understand
I'll
that.
give
but-
Cheryl your email address.
Yeah, no, I-
No,
I'm
you're
not
you're
suggesting-
absolutely correct, is that if, because they have 3 boilers and they were, if I remember right, they can operate off 2. If one goes down, okay, then they can repair it. If two goes down, I'd have to read the agreement, but their agreement may state that they can shut us off
Right.
to preserve their own campus. So that would then be an issue. And in the summertime, it also would be that similar situation. If it breaks down, it's a delay in their part and how fast can they get parts to repair it? As
Right, that is
opposed,
my point.
but-
I'm not suggesting we not do it. I'm
but
saying,
the flip side is once we build our own plant with a chip boiler operating, yes, we have the propane boilers in place to do that and switch. We would then be operating it. I don't believe, not 100% sure, whether or not we would need an additional position to be managing that. Right now, I don't know what we have. I believe we have a full-time maintenance person at the lab. So then would be to pick up it over there at the standalone building to be able to manage that. But that would also be something that we'd still have to evaluate.
Well, when we do markup, we'll have a committee discussion in terms of how we go forward on this, and also we may need, depending what happens with negotiations that happen with VTC, because you're gonna have to negotiate. If we do a combination here of helping them, there's gonna be some negotiations involved. There may be a new contract that will have to be drawn out. We don't know. There may need to be a check-in back with this committee off session. For that, just kind of thinking things through, because we just don't know what direction we're gonna go in, and we may not know until August of this year. So we're looking at money that we want to put in, but we don't know what we're gonna get for that money when we do markup in the next week in March and in the legislative session. So when we leave here in May, we may have a clearer path and we may not. So we'll make the best judgment we can in terms of the money that's being requested and maybe put some language around that. I don't know. I just want to put that on the table for members of the committee to think about. And maybe also we need to hear from VTC. That's the other partner here, and they may have a different perspective for all we know. I'm not saying they do, but they might. Are there any other folks here? I know we've got the Agency of Agriculture for Clean Water, but is there any other folks here that's connected with the Ag and A&R lab? Just to weigh in. Joe, you're getting close to being off the hot seat. Anything else?
I'll be back
Sure.
tomorrow, so.
Okay, yeah.
What's it?
The
preview tomorrow.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Would electric be considered a possibility? Because that hasn't been. talked
The
about.
heat, like heat pumps or just electric heat?
An electric boiler.
I'm back to the 60s.
Heat pumps are electric. Not that a heat pump would work down there because of the scale. I mean, it could be, but we have not evaluated that.
You know?
Yeah, I know they were considering an electric boiler for one of the guard stations. I don't know if you.
The armory, I wasn't-
For one of the armories, and the grid doesn't have the capacity to function at that level.
Any other questions here?
A lot to think about.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Thank you for coming up.
Wait, just one, no, just kidding.
Should I hang out just in case?
I'm sure you're gonna be back here when.
You here tomorrow? Hold your questions.
No, when we do markup on this one. Sure. Be more questions. Okay, folks, let's shift gears to the Agency of Agriculture, and you gotta go back a couple tabs. Or go forward for a couple tabs. You gotta go back to Clean Water tab. Shift gears. And on the spreadsheet, it is line 95, which is water quality grants at $3 million. And last year, The Agency of Natural Resources, not the Agency of Natural Resources, it's Agency of Ag. You received 2.75 million water quality grants for the 2 years. And this year, what the Clean Water Fund Board has recommended is $3 million for FY 26. That's, so,
Morning.
Andy, welcome.
I'm Laura DePietro, and I'm the Director of Water Quality. Nina Gage, who is the Assistant Director, will tag team this slideshow, but we're both available for whatever questions you have. I have worked here mostly in this type of capacity for about 20 years. So I've seen a lot of change in what we've done, and I've seen our capital budget change significantly over time. It used to be very, very small, and since then, what I'll show you and discuss is that we've increased regulations substantially on farms, which a lot of farms, the infrastructure to be able to build these practices, which are brick and mortar type practices that we need them to build. When we say build just $1 million project on your farm, right? They cannot change their milk price. They cannot change anything about what they sell as a product to then absorb that cost. So in statute, many years before me, it was put in that the cost of clean water, I mean, obviously management and responsibilities of the farmer, but the cost of some of the infrastructure to achieve these higher regulations that we've put in place shall be borne by the people so that the farming can continue and the landscape can continue. We are there to regulate, to make sure that those people continue to implement those practices and manage those practices so that they're not causing water quality concerns. So we sort of have a lot of opportunity here of what we do. We regulate, but we also educate, and we also provide the financial assistance. So we're sort of a whole package deal to get projects moving on the ground. So it's kind of a high level. So what we're going to go through today is some of that. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll look specifically at our capital budget and specifically over time. And we'll look at some of the programs. But to give you a sense, if you've watched water over the years, there was a pretty substantial upgrade that happened in 2015. It's called Act 64, or the Vermont Clean Water Act. And what that did was it put more people at the, and it put more money on the table. And so you've heard of the Clean Water Board, and I heard the other day the conversation, how there is the Clean Water Board. The Clean Water Board originally started with just funds that created that pot, which they come from various places, but it wasn't typically the capital funding in there. And then in years rolled out, the capital funding did get put in there so that the whole picture of what you can see for water is all in one space. But so during that time that all of the money got put in place to have continuous money for water quality, because that was something that the federal government, EPA said, Vermont, you have to do this. You have water quality issues. You don't have a reliable system to prove that you're going to address them because it costs money. And that was part of that piece. So when EPA did that, you know, the money came in place, but then the regulations all changed. So that's where we had this major upgrade across all sectors to increase regulation. So, you know, obviously in agriculture, but also in rivers and wastewater treatment plants, like name the sector, everybody got an upgrade. So you can see for us what it has meant is, you know, the ability to be out on site. What we do is we go through these farms. We walk around all of these farms. We walk around all the infrastructure. It's very different. There are other agencies that have, for instance, where people self-report that they've accomplished and are maintaining their projects. We are very different. We go and we look at it. And when we do that, we'll talk about some of the accountability that we have. But that is the accountability to say we have seen it and it is working, and therefore we can check and say, yes, like that's a clean water credit, call it for simplicity. And so when you look at the accountability results that you see from agriculture, they're very much verified. Right.
And if I can just interrupt here too, just so that the committee can really be focused on this. When we report out our capital budget on the floor of the House, there's new members are starting to see how bills are reported. members here are gonna be responsible for certain sections of this bill. I'm not reporting the bill. You folks are. So we break down, not everybody's gonna report, but probably about 70%, 80% of the committee members are gonna be reporting a couple sections of this bill. So I can't encourage enough to pay attention, particularly to clean water. And particularly when we hear from the Agency of Natural Resources, with our forests and parks, our dams, our wastewater systems, our municipal pollution grants, someone is gonna be reporting those sections, and it's not me. I'll be there for backup, but it's not me. You're gonna be, somebody here or two people will be the focus on the floor of the House to answer the questions. I'm just giving everybody a little shock treatment here that, oh my God, I might be that person reporting these sections. So I can't emphasize enough, particularly in these particular areas of clean water and Agency of Natural Resources, to really focus in and pay attention. Because when we divvy up the capital bill for who's gonna be reporting one section, you're gonna have to go back to this testimony. Putting that on the table.
And I will be there to support you if you have additional questions.
The chair's not gonna report it.
I want, sorry,
Just report.
for the record, both of you, I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. I just wanted to be conscious of the time, so I'm wondering if the committee has time for us to kind of go through all the background. That's great. I just didn't know if we should be skipping to like the budget.
I think if you gave a very high level background and then get into the budget.
We have until 10, correct?
10 we need to take a break. We have the ag fairs, folks, they're coming in for half an hour. And then at 10:30, we really have another discussion we have to
Okay, so
shift
we have
to.
about 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you. So we put a lot of resources and money into our partners. So we're not the only agency that do this work, right? So if you think of UV Extension or conservation districts, folks like that, when we get the Ag Water Quality Partnership together, which is a very formulated group of everyone who's doing this, it's well over 100 people who are out there in the field working with farms or in the offices. So we support a lot of these folks, and here's, you can see the various programs and the educational opportunities that we do. A lot of it, the big blue chart, part of the chart, is our partners out there doing a lot of education, and then the other ones are generally the agency doing the education. But certainly this is an important piece, because when that change happened, farmers actually have to get credits. So, and we have to certify people. So like there's professional licensure, right, in the world. We do that in agriculture. For if you're a farm, you have to have so many credits. If you're a custom applicator, so you spread manure, you have to have so many credits. So we have these educational requirements that we have to make sure are out there and available for people. Here is our total, I'll leave this slide up for a second so you just absorb it. This is all of our programming, the financial assistance dollars that go out for water quality from our division. So this isn't federal funding. This is just Agency of Agriculture. There are federal funds in here. You'll see Lake Champlain Basin Program and USDA, NRCS. That's because we go out and we get those monies and bring them in. And so they become part of our portfolio of what we're able to put out and make available. You can see there's a huge match component. It's really an important piece. I mentioned to you that the cost should, not be solely borne by the farmers. But it does say in law that the farmers have to have a stake. And so they have to typically have at least 10%, if not many times more, in these projects of their own money. So the dark blue is the capital funding, as you can see that. And there's some graphics we'll look at in a little bit. But if you can see, it kind of, I'm hoping the trajectory goes this way on my screen and that way on the other. It has gone up over the years. You can see 2016 is really when the water quality efforts really started to come into play, and then more and more increases in funding came to the agency, mainly because there were more resources at the agency to deploy those funds. We had, just a hand, like 1 or 2 engineers back then, and now I think we have, 6, 7 engineers that can go out and design and build these projects on farms. And these are not small projects. We'll show you some pictures of some of them, but a lot of times what we do, part of that match discussion is in statute. It is our first priority to get federal funding to match what we do. And so the USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture, Natural Resource Conservation Service is the main partner that we work with to make sure that farms get full package service. So they offer every farm bill money to farms. And there's a set amount for each farm bill that a farm gets. And once they've exhausted that, there's no opportunity for them to get federal funds. So just to give you some picture right now, federal government is, this last farm bill was 2018. They're supposed to be 5 years long. We still don't have a new farm bill. And I don't have a crystal ball, but I don't see a lot of progress in that space that makes me feel confident that we're readily going to see one. And so there's these challenges where farmers, we have pushed regulation and they have no access to federal money in many instances in this point because they've already utilized some of that. So having this state funding is very important for farms where we find major issues and really need to fix it so that water quality is addressed. Because once you get stuff into water, to get it back, if you've talked about like Lake Carmi aeration or alum treatments and those things, it is not affordable. It is much more affordable to fix it before it goes into the system. So I'm going to just do some skipping. And I'm going to leave it. So one of the questions I heard the other day was, is water getting better? Right? That was a question I had listened to on the recording. And I do want to share with you that yes, it is. Okay. But there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can look at to demonstrate it. I'm going to pass it off to Nina. She's going to show you some of our programs and show you some of the progress. And again, that progress and accountability is tangible. We've seen it. We've been able to document it and report out on it.
Hi, good morning. For the record, my name is Nina Gage, the Assistant Director for the Water Quality Division, Vermont Agency of Agriculture Food Markets. So I'm going to zoom in specifically on this bottom report, the Vermont Clean Water Initiative Performance Report, and I'm going to speak specifically about the agricultural sector. So this is a report that's it's written by ANR DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation, but it's the data that goes into it comes from across state government. So there are lots of agencies doing clean water work across the state. We develop accounting systems and metrics that we can tie back to be able to show statewide a picture of things are at. So the Lake Champlain Basin is hidden behind that nice little black box, but is the western edge of Vermont. And it's one of our primary TMDLs for phosphorus. So what we know is that phosphorus is a limiting nutrient that fuels algal blooms in the Lake Champlain Basin. So the EPA has required the state to make reductions in the amount of phosphorus data that gets to that lake. So far in fiscal 24, we have 54.7 metric tons that are estimated to have been reduced from entering Lake Champlain. Of that, 87% of the overall estimated reductions are from the agricultural sector. This graphic, as I mentioned, is made up of a combination of state programs, regulatory programs, and what happens with the federal government. So we have connections there, relationships where we're able to capture the data from the federal programs in order to see a real statewide picture about what's changing in the Lake Champlain Basin. So overall, the TMDL says we need to reduce about 212 metric tons. So big pie chart to the little pie chart. Agriculture is still yellow. The base load is about 261.5 metric tons, and we need to get down to 118.2. So you can see in both pie charts that agriculture is a large part of the puzzle, right? And what that means for us is that we have a lot of opportunity to work with farms to improve their practices. And I'm going to talk about the how in just a second. So far, we're about 25.8% of our progress for Lake Champlain.
For a year?
For the current state fiscal year.
Yep.
So 54.7. Now 54.7 out of that 212 metric tons is 25.8%. So we're up from last year. We were about 20%. Now we're at 25%. So we're seeing growth and progress as our counting systems get built, as we invest in programs, and as we get the projects on the ground.
So is that calendar year? No, this fiscal year. Got it.
So we're in the 20-year plan.
Some clean water projects have a lifespan that lasts longer. So if you implement a certain practice, it'll last for multiple years. Other practices last for 1 year. So our accounting system basically accounts for all those and then looks at it on a single year basis, because that's what how the TMDL is written. We need to make a 212 metric ton per year reduction. Now this differs on a
Very,
lake segment.
very basic. If you had a magic wand, you'd like this chart to go to 0, yes?
We'd like that chart to go to 212 metric tons.
That you've pulled out of the lake.
Yeah, it's funny because we talk about reductions.
Yeah.
No, it's all good.
Anyway, you'd like to have 0.
This chart would be bigger
Yeah,
and it would
yeah.
be 212 metric tons.
Right.
That's what we need to get to.
I asked the question wrong. You wouldn't want to see any of the phosphates anywhere in the water. Is that?
So there's, the TMDL assumes that, human civilization will continue. So we will still have impacts to water. The goal is to reduce those impacts by a proportion that allows the lake to be healthy.
So it can regenerate itself.
Yeah, does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So this differs on a per lake segment basis, right? Like we do a lot of work in certain areas. We have more agricultural land in certain areas, right? We're working in Franklin County, working in Addison County, Orleans County a ton, because that's where a lot of our farms are. So we're going to see different progress on a per lake segment basis. The graphs I just showed were sort of statewide. Where's our progress at? So I just want to highlight that. Now I want to zoom in specifically to the programming that our division does. And just share that we were about 78% of that graphic, that 54.7, the big yellow bar. Our programs specifically, the programs that we run, the compliance that we're able to certify on the ground on farms contributes to a significant amount, of our overall state reduction. So 78%. Again, agriculture is 83% of our progress. And our program specifically is about 78%. Now, that was all looking at state fiscal 24. We look at the whole clean water budget in state fiscal 24, our program receives about 24% of the proposed clean water budget from 24. Going into the fiscal 26 proposed budget, we're proposed at 31% of the overall.
So when you're talking about the Clean Water Fund budget, are you talking about both the revenues that go in there from different taxes as well as general fund and the other section of the Clean Water Fund, which is the capital budget?
The capital and clean water, all sources.
Okay.
So Memphremagog is a separate watershed. It's the purple area of the Orleans County area. So again, this is a separate TMDL. It's overseen separately by EPA. The overall reductions we need to make in this watershed are smaller, but again, agriculture is contributing to about 83% of the state's progress in this watershed. We're about 17% of the way there for Memphremagog. So the overall reductions we need to make are 15.2 metric tons. So big pie chart to the little pie chart, we need to reduce our overall load of phosphorus in order for the lake to be healthy. Again, agriculture is a big part of the source, but we're also have a lot of opportunity to reduce that yellow pie chart to get to the small yellow pie chart. So 17% of the way from Memphremagog. And then we also have a TMDL for Long Island Sound. So what all you need to, the takeaway here is basically all parts of Vermont are covered by some amount of federal mandates when it comes to improving water. The Long Island Connecticut River Basin, which is the eastern part of our state, drains the Long Island Sound. There's 5 states in that region, so there's a little bit of a longer process coordinating the accounting systems so that we have consistent methodologies for data tracking. I'm going to tell you about the how now. Sorry, I just want to give you the where we're at.
So this is what we need to focus in on, folks, because this is where our capital dollars go.
Okay, so we run 9 unique technical and financial assistance programs. There's one specific program I'm going to zoom in a little bit further on, and that's our best management practice program. That is where the proposed $3 million is set to go for fiscal 26. But I just want to give you a quick sense of sort of the bigger picture of what we do. So BMP is one of our programs, and it provides structural improvements to abate non-point source discharges from farms. We also provide technical assistance. So it's not necessarily always about an investment. Sometimes it's about working with an individual to say, can we manage this differently? Can we talk about an alternative before funding's put on the table? Other programs that we support are agronomic practices. We support riparian buffers through our CREP programs. This is taking land out of production and planting tree buffers. We have an equipment assistance program. We have a seeding and filter strip program. So just to give you kind of a quick story, this equipment right here is called a grassland shallow slot injection toolbar. So we support toolbars for conservation. This was developed in the Netherlands. It's a essentially a lot of land in agriculture in Vermont is in grass. If you want to apply manure, the nutrients needed to grow a healthy crop to be able to harvest, historically it was surface applied manure. So we had an extension professional out of the Middlebury office who got this piece of equipment over from the Netherlands, no small task, convinced a bunch of farms to try it out. They all got super excited. Now we have at least 4 systems that we've supported operating in the state of Vermont. So this injects manure below the soil surface, so it reduces runoff. And at the same time, it doesn't kill the grass. Because if you take a typical injection unit and we run it on grass ground, you're going to kill your grassland, which no farmer is going to do, right? You could try to explain it to them and they're going to be like, no, I'm not going to do that. So we're able to bring innovation and equipment to pursue our conservation goals. I'm going to talk a little faster and I apologize if it.
That's fine.
I know you guys want to take a quick break. So a couple of our other programs, we have a grazing assistance program, the pasture surface water fencing. So trying to provide alternatives. If you want cows to essentially not access the stream of your property, you have to support the farm to have an alternative watering source. So if I tell you, you want to give up, access to the stream, you're gonna say, well, what are my cows going to drink? So we work with them on a really simple fix, develop a watering system, tubs and pipelines so that their cows can access water and we can reach our water quality goals. And then the program on the bottom, I'll just highlight, this is the program where we release funding to local partner organizations. So extension professionals, conservation districts to, build relationship with landowners. It doesn't just happen when you tell someone, we're going to do a big project on your farm and you're going to love it, right? It takes building relationships over time to create trust, have buy-in on the project, develop all the funding sources. There's many that usually go into an individual project. So we work really closely with a large group of partners across the state, both at the federal level, so USDA, NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Service, and the Farm Service Agency, as well as folks like the conservation districts and UVM to essentially make the experience better for a landowner so that we can work together as a team at the state level to prioritize resources. Just a couple of pictures. I gave you kind of the big picture, what programs do we run? Just to give you some visuals, in this project, we implemented a larger buffer. So farms are required to have a 25-foot buffer. This farm was willing to expand that to a 50-foot area. You can see the same tree on the left-hand side of the photo and the center in the left photo and left side on the right photo. It's the same view looking down this area, just when it's being cropped as corn and once we've invested to incentivize the landowner to create a larger buffer. So these have an incredible efficiency when it comes to removing phosphorus runoff, and they're very affordable compared to some of the larger projects that we put in place. In this project, we fenced the cows back. You can just barely see the fence line in this right photo, and there's some cows right back there. So we fenced the cows out of the water, we set back the pasture, and helped implement a filter strip just to make sure that the water running off of this agricultural area gets filtered before reaching water. This is an awesome, it's a little delayed, awesome photo over time. This is one of our Conservation Reserve Enhancement Project photos. 2008, before the buffer was planted, 2008 after the buffer was planted, and 2022, so 14 years after the project is installed. You can see what happens over time. The more we can regenerate that area to filter nutrients. Again, this took providing the farm with small alternative options for where to feed and making sure that there was a crossing so that they could still access land that was on the other side of that water. Okay, zooming in on the BMP program. So the proposed $3 million in the state fiscal 26 budget is for best management practice program. This program, Laura alluded to this. We provide both cost share match towards federal contracts, and then we also provide state-only projects where our engineers support the design. And in this instance, I've used this photo in years past, so I apologize if you've seen it before, but the farmer was so excited after this project was done, they went out and bought a drone so that they could take pictures of the farm because they were so proud of the project. But anyway, there's a surface water just adjacent to this area that drains the Hungerford Brook, which is a part of the Missisquoi Basin. So it was essentially a barnyard area, heavy use area protection that was installed to better manage these animals and provide the farmer with a mechanism to more readily clean the areas that the animals were congregating. This is another example of a pretty, fairly simple fix to what could be a much more complex program. So this farm's organic, small farm, actually in the Connecticut River watershed. When you're an organic farm, there are requirements for having livestock access to outdoors on a daily basis. And sometimes in Vermont, when we have winter and spring, that can come into conflict with water quality regulation. So we were able to support the farm to cover this area in order to essentially reduce rainwater from mixing with the manure. But still provide the farm with that ability to maintain their organic certification. Okay, a couple of quick statistics about the BMP program. Our average timeframe for projects is 7.2 months. Average amount of award is about 73,000. And our average number of projects in a given year is about 53 over the last 3 state fiscal years. A very large portion of NRCS farmstead projects. So when the feds go in and do a big project on a farm, 83% of them are accessing state dollars to make that project happen. You can see the sort of breakdown of funding sources. A large portion of it is in 1 or 2 tones of yellow. Those are the match. So the state is putting funding forward, farmers are putting funding forward, the federal government is putting funding forward. And we're working with all different types of farm sizes through this program. So it's not just working with the large dairies by any means. 35% over the last few fiscal years was, in last fiscal year was certified small farms, and another 33% was small farms. So folks who have less than 50 cows or less than 50 acres of annual crop land. Okay, we're gonna get you guys a break.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Yes.
We have a question, Will?
Yeah. With the, on this part in particular with funding, I was just curious why the last few years have been so low. Or was that just because there was a different program? that
Money
funded
going
it?
out before.
Oh,
There was some alternative sources of funding that the state had access. Essentially, we were able to reduce our needs through the capital bill. So last year we had 550,000. The year prior was 2.2 million. Our agency received a variety of American Rescue Plan Act funds in previous fiscal years that supported this program. For the proposed fiscal 2026 governor's capital budget, the 3 million for water quality grants is specifically for the best management practice program.
So I know the pictures that you showed for the BMPs are really manure pit management, but there's other management that goes into the BMPs. You know, what are some of those other management tools?
Yeah, for sure. So I'd say there's a kind of wide swath. There's not a single farm I've ever been on that's exactly the same. Part of the process when a farm reaches out for assistance or when their local contact identifies them as a potential for a BMP project is determining what the systems are on that specific farm. So if they don't manage liquid manure, we might be supporting them to put in an appropriate location to stack manure, right? If they do have a liquid system, in some cases, we're supporting them to transition to a liquid system. So capturing more barnyard runoff, storing that barnyard runoff, and then applying it according to their nutrient management plan. In other instances, we're working with farms to, for simpler fixes. So, I showed that picture of the CREP project a couple slides back. So, farms got to access this field and this field. Their barn's over here and there's 2 streams in the way, right? How do we cross those streams? How do the cows access that area without causing undue impacts to those waterways? So wide swath of options. I would say we do a lot of heavy use area protection. So those are improved barnyard surfaces. So where cows are sort of on grass or on unimproved areas, we help the farmer put some concrete in. Sometimes it's a small amount, and it just gives them the ability to clean that up with a skid steer on a regular basis. So there we don't have ongoing pollution issues.
So what I'm hearing is the majority of the BMP practices is handling of the manure. It's not so much dealing with CREP or buffers.
Yeah, so I think generally when we talk about pollution from farms and specifically their farmsteads, we talk a lot about manure. The other sort of big area of potential pollution is silage leachate. So when you harvest 200 acres of land and you have all the silage from that land, it's a high concentration of nutrients. So we do a lot of like leachate collection and treatment systems. Sometimes it's collection, sometimes it's transfer. We do a lot of waste transfer. So it's collection of that silage leachate in a certain area and then transfer to their manure pit or liquid handling system.
And that would be part of the BMPs?
Yep, silage collection and treatment, yep, is one of the BMPs that we support. So there's a wide variety, but really a lot of like solid and liquid manure and silage projects, and then generally like how animals move in and around a barnyard, I think are the kind of general focus areas of BMPs on farms.
Questions?
What is your proposed global budget this year? Not the capitalized, but.
So our proposed budget is about 13 million overall. 3 million in capital and 10 in clean water. So Alice alluded to, Chair Evans alluded to the sort of larger, I got this little graphic here. There's a couple of fund sources that go on the clean water fund, so a portion is capital. But there are funds that come through the bottle sheets, which is when you don't return your bottles to the bottle redemption center, and then property transfer tax is a large source for the clean water fund. So there are other revenues that are coming in to support these programs. I think it's important to keep in mind that we have 9 unique programs, and different farms need different types of assistance. So the capital dollars support the EMP program, and then our other funds support our.
Bob, we're gonna take a quick 5-minute break, so if you could just wait out in the hall and then we can switch.
Thanks, Al.
Thank you. Sorry.
And going back to the daily load progress in Lake Champlain,
Yes, sir.
most of the opportunities appear to be or have been in agriculture. Is that indicative of future opportunities as well, or do you see those areas changing? Like stormwater appears to be very, very small.
So I don't, I probably can't speak too much to the other sectors. What I will say in agriculture is we have the most cost-effective solutions for clean water. And we've shown a really significant amount of progress the last few years with increased investments. But I would encourage you to invite our colleagues from the Agency of Natural Resources, Department of Environmental Conservation to come in and speak to some of the other sectors and the progress and the work happening in them. They definitely have that big picture statewide look on things and are a little bit more familiar with the sort of regulations, changes, and programming in the other sectors.
So for the $3 million that is being proposed for FY 26, how many applications are in the queue?
So we have 55 active projects that were awarded in our last state fiscal year. That represents about 65% of our applicants. So we have somewhere in the range of 20 applicants who were sort of deferred to reapply because we didn't have sufficient funds despite there being an eligible and good use of funds. And then we have an application deadline coming up in April and May. So we anticipate a full hopper of potential projects. There is a lot of uncertainty about other funding sources right now. So I think it's important to just remind the committee the importance of having state funding available when other funding sources are very uncertain for farmers to access.
So you deferred 20 applications because you didn't have enough money to get you through the FY 25 budget year. And then you're assuming those 20 applicants will reapply for the FY 26. And then you're going to have new applications coming in April. Is that what you said?
They're already coming in now.
Coming in now.
But our deadline for applications, so we don't start sort of reviewing them essentially until May. But we anticipate a very full hopper of projects coming our way. And some of those, we know about because potentially they're an active enforcement issue. It's a high priority project. And others, they'll come forward and ask for assistance.
So do you think that there is more interest and more applications coming in because farmers are fearful the federal money is going to dry up?
I think there is probably concern in all regards in that space. I think that some farmers, like Laura alluded, aren't eligible to receive more funding. Other farmers may not have the opportunity or not be willing to take the potential risks associated with it.
Yeah, so I just want to say, with having a good volume of applications coming in, and we're shifting how we're doing it, right? So we've talked before in this committee about how there's a lot of prep work that goes into making a project before we even get to a contract. So everything that's coming in for this upcoming deadline, is planned for next year, right? So we're
Next year being calendar year?
So
Or next
year, we look at field season, construction season, right? So the engineers already have projects from last year that they've been working and building up that they're going to be able to implement this season. Everyone who comes in for applications this year, they'll do the design work and then implement next year. And so there's this constant understanding of the need that we're already engaged in designing the year before we're actually putting that on the ground.
So there's a year delay in terms of when our dollars go out the door, really.
Well, but we're ahead of when your dollars come in, we can move your dollars on the ground because we've already done the work. We don't need the dollars to do the design work. We need the dollars to do the implementation work. So we're actually caught up in pushing forward where we're having to tell people, sorry, we can't service you until the next year, so you're in this queue. And as far as demand, I think a lot of that is because we have inspectors on the ground, right? We all slow down when we see the police and the median. It's just nature. There are more people out there doing this work. There's more discussion and challenges. There's public pressure, all the things, right? And just moral understanding of the right thing to do. Education does a lot to get people where they need to understand how to access programs and how to do stuff. And then the partnership has put money into people to help farms apply for things, to get engaged and access these dollars.
So I want more clarity on the 3 million, because what you just said confused it. So there's 3 million for FY '26. Is that 3 million going towards the 20 applicants that were deferred, that you didn't have enough money going through 25? And also the new applications that are coming in? Is it backfilling any of the projects that you approved in 24 and 25?
So the fiscal 26 proposed budget would support applicants that do not currently have a contract, that we do not currently have funding to support. So just to remind you, last fiscal year, we established about $5.8 million in awards. It was a combination of different funding sources. So some was ARPA funded, some was the capital funding from 25. But just to give the life cycle of the project. So our average project takes about 7.2 months. So we have the 20 farms that we've referred from last season to reapply. We're going to get, I would say, anywhere in the name of 40 to 50 new applicants. Those projects will be ranked and prioritized in the spring and summer. So initial site visits, initial concept discussions with the farm. And then essentially maybe we have a set of projects that are ready for contract in the fall and then go to construction in the spring of 26.
That 3 million would be used for construction next spring. And maybe some of that 3 million will be used this summer as well.
Yeah, so one of the considerations to keep in mind is, we don't control all aspects of contractor scheduling. So when and if a contract is in place doesn't necessarily guarantee that the contractors are going to be available for the following spring. So we see project delays, as do all construction sectors. Sometimes those last for 6 months. So maybe it's set for spring and it happens in the fall. Sometimes it's a following year process. The other thing that comes up that sort of delays projects in general is the financing. So farms don't typically put a project in place when they have financing from a single entity. It takes many grants to get a project in. So maybe it's 2 grants, state and fed, maybe it's a state grant and a private grant to make the project happen. So we see delays in both contractors and we see delays in financing. But again, our average project timeframe from contract start date to completion of payment date is 7.2 months. So we really aim to make sure the dollars get out the door.
To that question, there is a small group of us, 3 of us on the subcommittee that are charged with considering the reallocation of unencumbered funds. We need to have that conversation again, but we have to date not heard back from the agency.
Okay, I have the memo just in case I thought.
Yeah, no, we sent them last week.
A lot of money.
Yeah,
When did you send?
we don't have to have the conversation now, but I would like to schedule a time where we could just at least get your testimony on there's 4 line items.
So I don't want to take the
Yeah.
time right
The
now.
simple answer is there's 0 in most of the
I
towns.
mean, you need more than the simple answer.
Give one to Brian.
So I don't want to get into this,
Yeah.
folks, just the repo committee, just the repo committee, just the repo committee.
Been all my own.
Just I'm looking folks, I'm looking at the time, we have a hall full of people waiting to come in, so I don't want to spend the time right now on this. This was we have 3 folks from our committee that are working in the reallocations. They sent out the communication, that's who it goes to. We're going to be doing more conversations about this. There's a lot of moving pieces in the clean water, as well as next week when we hear from Eric Blatt on our municipal pollution grants and our clean water revolving loan fund, as well as our drinking water revolving loan fund. So we're going to have committee members doing a lot more work individually in small groups, working on getting deeper into the money and the money flow from all of those. We're just not there yet. We're working up to it. Anything else before we finish up? Because we do have to end. because we do have folks out in the hallway.
Just two slides real quick. We have some colleagues who work on land use policy in the state of Vermont. I know that members on this committee are not necessarily chairs or members in the agricultural committee. So just quick context on the state of agriculture in Vermont. Since 2016, when we've enacted really intense water quality regulations, we've lost 350 dairy farms, 14,000 cows, 72,000 acres crop of pasture land. There was a large survey effort done for Vermont farms, which showed that 57% of all farms were untrackable and lost a combined $85 million in 2022. So just, I think we give you the why. We have increased regulations and requirements in Vermont, the opportunities that we see to improve our water quality by working with farms to improve their practices. And just to understand that, we know what some of the issues are, which is really access to capital to make some of these improvements. So that's where we've designed a lot of our programs.
Anything else? Thank you, folks. I
Thank
know
you.
you brought in a lot of folks that haven't had a chance to testify. Were you anticipating testifying?
No,
just here in
support.
Just here in support, okay.
Getting that back.
So let's take a very quick 5-minute break because we have the ag fairs out in the hallway wanting to talk about their ag fair grants, and that's under